Welcome to Keeping the World Company on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today, we'll talk about looking under the hood for what Trump is really doing in global trade, Trump's connection between tariffs, shipping choke points, global trade in general, supply lines, and ultimately inflation. Our co-host for the show is Tim Apicella. Our esteemed guests for the show are Ben Davis, Toledo University Law School, and Gene Rosenfeld, independent scholar. Manfred Henningsen, Emeritus Professor of Political Philosophy, Manoa. Welcome to you all. Let me begin by saying Trump tells us what he wants to tell us, but he doesn't tell us much about what he wants to keep secret. So we're talking about what reaches the public and what doesn't. Our panel today will examine his plans, that is Trump's plans and connections beyond tariffs, the outlines of Trump's greater global plan, and the possibility of strategic connections, strategic contentions, global trade, and supply lines. So let me go to you first, Ben. Trump says he's negotiating with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping says, no, he's not negotiating with us. And they're both making worldwide statements on opposite ends of that factual issue. Do you have a sense of who's telling the truth and why, and who's lying and why?
What's the Aeschylus quote, which is the first casualty of a trade war is truth, right? So in this setting, I have no idea who's telling the truth or who's telling a lie. But what I can say is, well, who has lied to me more of the two? And, I must admit, from everything I've ever seen, I haven't had as many lies coming at me from Xi Jinping as I've had coming from, or misstatements coming from the President of the United States. So if I had to be a betting person on it, I'd go with Trump, because the second thing is that the Chinese reaction has been what? To say, we're going to war, and people even said to them, well, you're going to lose 15% of your exports. And I think the comment from the Chinese was, we don't care. Well, we don't care if we lose the American market. That's pretty harsh, okay? So with all that said, I think that there's not much dialogue going on. Finally, you hear about some kind of trade deals being done already or in the process of being done, but they never identify who it is. And so that makes me really question whether there's in fact significant trade deals that are being done at this point. Rather, more likely, there's lots of rearranging going on around the world around us, I suspect, but I don't know.
By the way, why would Trump lie in such an obvious point of fact to say that he's having negotiations when in fact he's not having negotiations? What's the motivation there?
They said, 90 deals in 90 days. So we're 30 days into the 90 days. So you better be having some kind of talks with somebody or make the appearance of it, or else you lose even more credibility. So that's why I think he's got the interest in lying, is that he's just said that he would be doing deals. I think he said on some show he had 200 deals already done. And there are only 192 countries in the world. So, I'm like, okay, whatever that is. So it's basically trying to spin things and consistent with his prior spinning,
We talked about this. Let me just touch Tim for a minute. We talked about deals in the world that Trump may have made. You thought that he had made a deal with Vietnam. Has he? Have you followed up on that? Because I think maybe he hasn't made a deal with Vietnam.
No, I think they made a beeline to Washington, D.C. immediately after the 46% tariff was announced against Vietnam. Coincidentally, China made a beeline to Hanoi to say, hey, remember, we are your neighbor, and we've never jacked you in the back as bad as you're being jacked right now by the United States. So I don't think they've settled on a complete deal with Vietnam. I know Vietnam depends on this trade relationship with the United States. We've encouraged it. We've promoted it. We've promoted to be an alternative to China. And this is how we treat those that we encourage to be our trading partner. Just a quick point on who to believe, the leader of China or our own president of the United States. In the law enforcement arena, there's a Latin term used as modus operandi, which is to say, what is your behavioral pattern, or what's the usual pattern? Need I remind all of us that in the first term, by the end of his first term as president of the United States, he was logged in with over 30,000 plus lies, documented lies. So I'm going to trust the leader of China, unfortunately, to my own president of my own country. How sad is that?
Yeah. Okay, back to Ben. Ben, you talked about Xi and what he's doing in terms of taking advantage of Trump's chaos. And the news is that Xi is making friends all over Southeast Asia. He's recruiting new members for BRICS, which of course includes Russia. Now, is that, expansion of BRICS, are these new trading partners and friends in Southeast Asia temporary or permanent? How will it end up? Is he just responding to Trump, or is he building a new world?
Well, I think the sense is that thanks to what Trump has done, the American credibility is lost after carefully built over 80 years. And I even hear that people in Europe, or governments in Europe, are also talking about turning towards China too. So there is something going on. There was already the Chinese in Africa, and there is some Chinese investment down in South America. So yeah, there is something moving towards China in the setting where there's this vacuum from the United States. Whether people or countries want to deal with China is a whole other thing. But as the Chinese they have 1.4 billion people that they have to keep moving and keep the economy going for. So they have a lot of interest in trying to keep trade going, to keep the growth rates inside of China.
Well, how do you reconcile that, Ben, with the fact, as Tim mentioned, that Xi Jinping has said we're never giving up on this? We're at war, and we're going to continue the war. What is in Xi's mind? He continues to take a hard line, no matter what Trump does.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not an expert on Chinese history, but I certainly do remember the Opium Wars and the gunboats coming up the Yangtze and all that kind of memory of sort of Western imperial powers trying to open China aggressively, right? They have a memory of that. And one of the things that I've noticed in Chinese views, certainly in international law, is reciprocity is really important to the Chinese in the terms of their relationships with others and mutual respect. So to the extent that Trump is not showing that kind of mutual respect, that hits at something very deep in Chinese leadership's sort of psyche, or memory. So I think that's the clear direction of what the Chinese are doing. Is they have both the wherewithal and the sophistication to be able to move more countries, more things towards them.
Yeah, they can outsmart him and out trade him with others for sure. I also wanted to mention that I do a lot of YouTube, and I learn a lot from YouTube. And one of the things I've noticed is a proliferation of movies on YouTube just recently, within the last week or two. Within the last, iteration of all this trade war stuff, China has been posting on YouTube. They've been posting stories about their own prosperity, about the technological marvels they are developing, about their trade with other countries. They're on a prosperity promotional kick. It's hard not to see that. It's so obvious. One of the stories that I caught just yesterday was a story about KATL, which is an incipient Chinese company on batteries. And this company wants to make batteries for the world. high-tech batteries that are more high-tech than any of the batteries anywhere. And Wall Street was involved in this IPO, and it had committed to funding a good portion of the startup capital for KATL. But suddenly, and apparently at Trump's demand, because he's anti-China and he wants to hurt China, he wants to have a war with China, Wall Street pulled out of this IPO. And the general idea of that move is that that makes the U.S. look unreliable. Here they had committed to funding, and then they changed their minds, and they changed their minds for political reasons. And so you wonder, whether the United States still has the credibility in the capital markets. This is the capital market. And when you think of that, you wonder whether the dollar will continue as the reserve currency. So I'd like to get your hand on that, Gene. What is going on with the capital markets, and why is the U.S. weaponizing capital? And how could this possibly help us?
Well, it may be too intricate for a political administration like this to address. I think there are certain flags that Trump responds to. And remember, he is the guy in charge. And he has a submissive cabinet, a submissive legislature, a threatened judiciary, and a partly cheering and partly outraged electorate. So he wants to be king of the world. And China is what sociologists call a worthy challenger, meaning that if he can be seen as a player with China for the control over markets, capital, currency, trade, and just general wealth, this elevates him to a global status. In his first administration, he wanted to be elevated to a superpower status, the leader of a superpower, by playing footsie with Putin. Now he wants to be seen as a king of the world. And so he really does have a strategy, but it doesn't take the intricacies of the economy into account. He hires people with very little expertise and reputation in economics to speak to the larger world as if they knew something. They use big words, they use economic words, they have degrees, but they're nowhere near the caliber of the people he is firing left and right. So you have to look at Trump as a political animal and in terms of his own personal psychology, because this is an instance in history when one man is really making a difference in the world. So that's perhaps why he's not interested in capital. It's not a sexy topic. Whether he discusses it at his roundtables with other people, we don't know. A lot is going on under the table. But what he's trying to do is control trade routes, and to amass wealth in the hands ostensibly of the United States by going through what he calls a temporary disruption, which may last years and may lead us into a recession and greater inequality and ultimately tank us and put us in a world bankruptcy court, just as he's put his businesses into bankruptcy.
Well, it's interesting that this is beyond just the inflation in the country, beyond the price of eggs, beyond the import-export, world of the American economy. This is global, and it has a profound effect, of course, as on the U.S. as a global phenomenon. But Manfred, I want to ask you about shipping. Okay, there's a lot of material on YouTube also about the shippers. The shippers, that is the international shippers, the big shipping companies, are canceling or slowing down voyages. Buyers in the US and elsewhere are canceling purchasing. Sellers in China are closing factories. The media says we're going to have a big decline at Christmas, not that Christmas is all that important. But they say that toys will not be available and all that Christmas gear will not be on the shelves. So a lot of retailers will have to fold or slow down. And Christmas, therefore, won't be a happy time. I'm not sure that's an accurate assessment of the result of canceling voyages and slowing down global shipping. But what I worry about is that this goes way beyond what our conversation has been. We're talking about slowing down shipping all over the world. We're talking about the economy writ large. What are your thoughts about that? How concerned should we be? Or is this just limited to Christmas toys?
No, it's not limited to Christmas toys. I mean, it's very interesting when you look at the container harbors, Long Beach and others. You have there one major company, it's Danish, Maersk. You have another European company, Hapag-Lloyd, it's German. But you have Evergreen, I think that's a Chinese one. And all of them are waiting to be processed. Now, look, I do not want to, I have no intricate knowledge of these container ship policies. But one thing, I mean, it's clear, and I think should be emphasized, that the loss of trust in the United States political behavior as a result of the first 1,000 days or first 100 days is unbelievable. And when you are in Europe, I think it is as bad as anywhere else. They are waiting there for the German government finally coming into power next week because they hope that Friedrich Merz, who is not a friend of Trump, his relationship with Trump is worse than that of Angela Merkel, that he will take the leadership in the European Union and establishing connections with China and all kinds of other South America. So what you will get is a rearrangement, of the global economy as a result of the self-destructive policies of a president who has no geopolitical imagination whatsoever. He doesn't know.
Is that temporary or permanent?
No, that will be permanent, I think. So what you will have is a rearrangement of relationships as a result of that. And, you have then, in addition to that, the fear of Putin and what he is doing. You have troop movements at the Finnish border, which has created a lot of nervousness in Europe and in the Baltic states. So in addition, to his inability to understand the geopolitical situation in the economic realm, in the political and military realm, he is ignorant as well. I mean, it's absolutely stunning.
Let me go to
But look,
Tim.
there's one other point that I wanted to add to that. I've read a few hours ago that the American economy has been shrinking 0.3%, whereas the German economy has grown 0.2% at the same time. Now that is surprising because people would say, the German economy, as a result of the threat with the car tariffs, will be going down. But I think the German economy is not simply the car industry, and all kinds of other. There's something to be added, and that has to do with the flight, of capital into the euro from the dollar. I mean, that is an additional factor that people are worried about in the financial markets.
Well, maybe you could just take a moment and tell us what happens if the world moves to another reserve currency. What happens to the U.S. economy?
Well, they won't lose it, but it'll be devalued. Now, on one hand, because it's devalued, that welcomes foreign investments into the United States because our dollar has been devalued, so therefore our prices are less, and operate business is cheaper. But as far as the power of the dollar, it hurts the United States. that tends to have an upward pressure on interest rates. And that creates, of course, a result in inflation.
Xi Jinping and BRICS are trying hard to establish alternate reserve currencies, not just one, not just the Chinese RMB, but others, just to demonstrate that the US reserve dollar is not really the future.
Okay, so this is not just simply on the dollar. You're going to have to look at where the foreign investments are as far as buying our treasuries, our T-bills.
Oh, I should mention, by the way, Tim, and really important to all of you, we predicted a week ago that China would sell our treasuries. They are, in fact, doing that now. They're not appearing at the auctions. They're not buying American paper. This is right now, without a word, without any public statements, without any speeches or rhetoric. That's exactly what they're doing. Your thoughts?
Well, that's part of the trade war. Do you think it would just involve trading? Of course not. It was going to involve their commitment to United States treasuries and renewing those billions and billions of dollars of treasuries they own. And they're saying, this is part of the game. Why should you not expect that? There will be other countries that have similar fears, depending on how bad their tariffs are. So again, tying to the dollar, if our deficit is not getting renewed on the treasuries, which funds our deficit, then that puts more pressure on interest rates to attract foreign investors, because now the interest rate's a lot more palatable, a lot more attractive. And higher interest rates means higher inflation. Of course, that has a round robin effect, self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, of reduced GNP and economic strength.
It's interconnected, but you don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's, as Ben said in the earlier show today, it's very hard to predict the future right now. There's so many balls in the air. And Ben, I want to move to you. So Trump says he gave a 90-day pause. I don't know how you decide on a 90-day pause as opposed to an 80-day pause, as opposed to a 200-day pause. I don't know how he decided that. But what does that mean? What happens, in the pause? What kind of elements and processes and phenomena can take place in what we have is a chaotic global negotiation? What happens in the 90 days?
Again, I'm not sure on this, but I did listen to a commentary a couple days ago, which was saying that in Trump's first term, the deal that was done between the Americans and the Chinese took 2 years. So 90 to be worked out. So a 90-day pause is like 1/8 of the time it took. And on a massive scale like what we're dealing with now, you could think that it might be even longer than 2 years for this all to be kind of worked out. So it means to me, at least, that we're in for a past 90-day series of complications. What it does is that this whole uncertainty about the tariffs coming down and all that stuff, all is not worked out. And the Chinese response and the Chinese going into the treasury markets or not, all that stuff is kind of at least a 2-year potentially problem, as opposed to just a quote unquote just a 90-day problem. And so that's a lot of uncertainty for both the American economy and the rest of the world.
It strikes me that in the 90 days, you have a hardening. You have countries out there that are ticked off at the U.S. for having created the chaos and threatening all this tariff increase and whatnot. And in that 90-day period, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to find other ways. It's a 90-day, am I right? It's a 90-day period that benefits them because they, like Xi Jinping, can look to other countries, establish other arrangements, trading arrangements and capital arrangements without the U.S. So it actually works against us, doesn't it?
Jay, your optimism is so wonderful. I would just say that, yeah, we've lost an enormous amount, okay, and we're going to continue to lose an enormous amount of capacity in the world. The only thing that we really do at this point is play the threatened game, right? In terms of soft power, we don't have soft power anymore. In terms of even respect, just respect. I mean, I got to tell you that one thing that really struck me was at the Pope's funeral. They showed on TV when Zelensky came into the area where everyone was, and he received enormous applause from all the heads of state that were there. When Trump came in, the silence was deafening. And I've got to tell you this, that when he came in, the way he came in reminded me more of a mafia don than a president of the United States. I mean, it was really very deep. So one part of this that I think of for the 90 days is people or companies coming to see Trump to get exemptions, right? For this and for that. And how do you get an exemption from Trump? You pay him something somewhere, you cryptocurrency, whatever. So there's a self-enriching thing. I saw that there's a new club that's been opened in Georgetown called the Executive Branch, where you can become a member if you pony up $500,000 and meet with the administration people. There's this thing with the cryptocurrency that if you make the top 25 or 200 people who invest there will be able to have an evening with Donald Trump, which apparently they picked up like $100 or $200 million a day for that. And that goes straight into his pocket. You understand? And it's the people around him who are on that gravy train. I haven't even spoken to the people who are benefiting from the potential manipulations of the stock market, since apparently it's not insider trading to trade on non-public information that is coming from the president. And you can say one thing and get the sell short or whatever it is, buy short, all those games those people do to make a gazillion dollars. So if you're friends of Don, you get a piece of the action, so to speak.
Well, it sounds like so many other things that he's tried to sell and try to make a few coins on the side. That never stops, does it? Never stops. But let me move to Gene. I want to talk to Gene about choke points. Gene, can you talk to me about choke points? There are three major choke points in the world. There's the Panama Canal, shipping choke points. The Suez Canal, of course, that's accessible from the Red Sea. That's where Yemen does its dirty work, and the Strait of Malacca off China. And so my question to you is, what is Trump doing about these choke points? Does he feel that he can dominate them? Are there others that we haven't discussed? And if he does dominate them, how does that affect global shipping?
Let's pan back for a minute and take a big geopolitical look at all what underlies this in terms of power. Wealth is one aspect. Power is another aspect. Control of the shipping routes throughout the world grants maximum power. The nation, the country with the greatest navy generally emerges as the superpower in the world. Britain was for many years, then it passed to the United States. Now China is building an immense navy. That is no mistake. They know that principle as well as we do. So China has been very aggressive in the South China Sea, and the choke point for world trade in the South China Sea, so that it doesn't have to go way out of its way and incur a lot of expense, is the Strait of Malacca, which is opposite Singapore and Malaysia. And that's what China is exerting control over. And we, of course, put our naval ships there to shadow and challenge and say, no, this is international water. And China keeps pushing back and saying, no, this is China's near abroad, and we're going to control it. So that's one thing. We, on the other hand, have been in control of the Panama Canal until Trump made an issue of it and said Jimmy Carter gave it away, and the Chinese are taking tariffs at either end of it, taking contributions. And so he has made a thing about the Panama Canal and revived the Monroe Doctrine. The third choke point is one where there is a war going on in the Middle East. Let's not lose sight of the fact that there's a wider war in the Middle East right now, and that's the Red Sea. And the choke point is opposite Yemen and Somalia. The United States has gotten very interested lately in Somalia, which is opposite Yemen. and is on the choke point there at the Suez Canal. But in order to get to the Suez Canal, you have to enter through the south and the strait between Yemen and Somalia. So the United States is contending for that with Israel's help, which is one reason why we continue to supply Israel in its war, because there is a wider geopolitical issue at stake here that people lose sight of because of the Hamas propaganda. And that fact is that there is a battle royal going on for control of the Middle East. And the Houthis are in league with Iran, which is in league with Russia. And Russia is the ideological player since 2007, and especially since 2014. Putin has made no secret of the fact that he wants to align with one great consortium in the world, larger than that of the United States, the West, Europe, and our allies. And Trump has been helping him with that because he's been destroying the Pax Americana and our allies. So BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, for some reason, is the symbol for the great polar control that Russia wants to exert through the world. They want to, number one, change the currency so that the dollar is no longer the currency, and Trump is helping with that. They want to exert sea power and become a military power. And then they want to have others pay tribute and be submissive. And they're making military threatening moves toward Europe in this regard.
It's too early to soak my head, but let's press on. So, Manfred, the same administration, the Trump administration, that all but ended USAID and created, all kinds of new hunger, starvation, widespread famine and fatality in the global South. That same organization is creating all of this chaos in global trade. Is that consistent? Why do that? Why would you end USAID and at the same moment do the tariff thing and damage global trade and supply lines?
A president who doesn't know what he's doing, has no geopolitical vision, has no understanding of the United States' role in the world. I was just going through journals that I took from 1988 until 2020, travel in China. And what always struck me during that period, during these many travels that I had in China and encounters at universities, how positive the image of America was. And this positive image of America in China was the result of the role that the US played during World War II. You have to remember, for the Americans, not for the Europeans, but for the Americans, World War II starts for the Americans with Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is 4 years after the massacre, the Nanjing massacre. And I was at the 75th anniversary of, the Nanjing massacre in December of 2012. And it was even there still, present, this positive image of the United States. And I think Trump has no idea of any of that. And many Americans don't have that either, how this image has been slowly destroyed.
Maybe not so slowly.
But I mean, it's a slow process. When I, was traveling in China for these many years, it was absolutely stunning, this positive image connected, with Pearl Harbor and Nanjing. Those were the two critical points.
Let me go to Ben for a minute, because we have been discussing, what the public is really aware of, whether it's eggs or the price on groceries and whether there's anything on the shelves. I mean, I fully expect in the next 60 days with the supply line issues we have discussed right here on this program, that there'll be a shortage in things like toilet paper, which is always, an important metric somehow. But my question to Ben is, where do the people, begin to get concerned? What do they have to see? Do they understand about global shipping, global trade, global supply lines, all these ships, stuck outside of LA, global inflation, other countries, and what Xi Jinping is doing and what Putin is doing in order to undermine the U.S.? Do they understand that? And I mentioned before, there are some commentators who feel that Trump's corruption is something they need to understand. But I think we're together in the notion that they don't understand that, and they're not likely to understand that. They're more likely to understand Christmas ornaments at Christmas time. But when do these things that we've been talking about, when do they coalesce into a political phenomenon that affects public opinion in this country, this undereducated country?
I think that there's a great difficulty, and Manfred can particularly speak to this from his experience, and Gene too, and I think Tim and you can too, with question to the sources of information for the American people. I mean, the American press, the mainstream media, has typically done a pretty poor job of explaining these kinds of things, particularly since there's been that hollowing out for 30 odd years of reporters abroad and all that stuff who can translate all of these things to the American people. So I'm not holding this against the American people. I'm just saying that they're not getting information that tends to possibly make them be ignorant. So where does it come to? Well, as they used to say, if your neighbor loses their job, it's a recession. And if you lose your job, it's a depression. And so the thing is, I think that's where it all comes together, where no one really understands or needs to understand or feels the need to understand all these complexities. They are just looking at really what we would normally look at. What's the price of my gas? Can I fill my tank? Can I pay my bills? And do I have a job? And everything beyond that, if that's not going well, which all these different sources of concern that we're expressing make us think they will not be going well, then they will be concerned to move out the people who are in power. That's it. But until that starts to bite, it's not so sure. That's one of the reasons, for example, that you saw, I think it was yesterday, there was this whole story about putting the import tax on the actual Amazon bills there, along with the sales tax, it'd be an import tax, and how the Trump administration went ballistic about that to get Jeff Bezos to get rid of that, to hide it from the American people. Because if Americans understand sticker shock, okay? Also, I would just like to say one other thing, which I'm very cynical about, is that if you hide that tax, what will happen is that businesses will actually raise prices higher than the import tax. And they'll just say, oh, it's the import tax. How can I say that? Why did I say that? Because I remember when Europe switched over to the euro. And what did businesses, they were supposed to do it sort of one-to-one between their currency and the euro. And a number of them did a little bit of what we call price gouging in their prices in euros to take advantage of that moment.
Yeah, that's opportunism. It's part of the human condition. Yeah. Let's go to final thoughts, if you don't mind. Tim, let me start with you. The title of our show is Looking Under the Hood for What Trump is Really Doing. What is he really doing, and how is it really affecting us?
Well, I think what he's really doing, and has been doing it for the last 9 years, is an unequal balance between the culture wars versus economic vitality for the country. He may say he's all for bringing down prices and economic stability and progress, but in fact, he has them hook, line, and sinkers on the culture wars. And this goes to Ben's point about where we get our information. What influences our information are that information that already confirms that which we hold near and dear to our hearts. So if I think I have a certain mindset about culture, cultural issues, and Fox reconfirms those feelings, those beliefs, that's what I'm going to tune into. So I'm in the information bubble. I don't get any other facts or other points of view about what's going on in the world. And I think that's where Donald Trump gets us hook, line, and sinker. Democrats are in their bubble, the MAGA are in their bubble, independents bounce back and forth somewhere in between. And until we agree to the facts, we'll never know to what degree Donald Trump has screwed this country over. But once we do start seeing the facts and/or supply shortages, which again relates to inflation and shortages, then we'll all have the facts in front of us, and it'll be a painful lesson of the facts.
Yeah, we're going to have pain one way or the other. Gene, your thoughts, and to what extent do you agree with Tim?
Well, I generally agree with Tim, and the people on this panel who are really bring a lot of experience and knowledge to the subject, and I want to thank them. It's really stimulating. I want to go back to the one thing that Trump has said among all the millions of things he said that really struck me hardest, and that is, I love the uneducated. Mm-hmm. Because before the Supreme Court right now, we have a case in which a small Catholic school wants the right to teach religion as a public school. And once you have religious schools becoming public schools, the barriers between church and state break down. Why is that important? Because 30 to 40% of the people in the United States and a great part of the MAGA base are individuals who look more to religious text, mythology, ritual, and what they've been told as kids by their parents and communities, which we are all influenced by, regarding the real world. And although that belongs in the realm of aspiration and moral behavior and family solidarity, and has many good things about it, it creates a general conventional idea that the world runs on different principles. If you look at the international world, it's the toughest neighborhood in history, and no rules really run it. What Trump has said to the world is, by his chaotic, erratic behavior and his grasping for world domination as an individual, is that each country has to look out for itself. Each country has to pay for its own defense. Each country can't look to its neighbor except with suspicion and concern. And this has really made a mess of alliances and the need for us, particularly now in the middle of a gross technological revolution and planet capabilities at this particular time, has made people run for cover into religion and apocalyptic fantasies, which undergirds all of this, in my opinion. But that's a totally different subject.
Okay, Manfred, your thoughts. See if you can bring some of this together for us. How do you see this all evolving?
Let me try to bring it together with a topic we didn't talk about. I think once Trump will force the Western allies to accept Putin's deals for a ceasefire or peace in the war, you will have the total confrontation between Europe and the United States, because the Europeans will not accept these demands that Putin makes and that Trump seems to support. So you will have a real confrontation. I mean, I was reminded of that when I read a long interview with Timothy Snyder in the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung, where he surprisingly said he has not left the United States. He and his wife have accepted positions in Toronto, but he is coming back and forth. But the way he was talking about this move toward fascism in the United States was absolutely stunning. And how he feels that when it comes to this confrontation within the Western alliance between the United States and Europe, the Europeans will not agree with the United States.
Okay, wow, we're really covering a lot of stuff today. Ben, your thoughts? What would you like to leave with our audience?
In the darkest of times, as we've been going around looking at what's going on here, The I guess the one thing that I do deeply believe is that there are always possibilities to try to make things better in some way, shape, or form. And so, to the extent we are confronted with a very difficult president and his administration right now, we can do what we can to temper the downside risks that we are, as Americans, are going to experience. To the extent we can try to, I'm not saying we can succeed, but to the extent we can try to. The thing that I think about is, just imagine if all the stuff we've described about what Trump has done occurred and no one in the United States said anything about it, that there was pure silence, or even around the world. I think that a comment was made about President Trump that his focus is on who is strong and who is weak. That is a very scary way of looking at the world. We've seen that before. And so one of the things that is important, I think, is to combat this authoritarian ideology. Or as Tim Snyder said in his book on tyranny, you have to be ready to die fighting it, or you will be under tyranny. So it's the time, and with indignation, I think, to do the things that you think you can do to push back against all of this. That may sound a little Pollyannish to all the grizzled people around here. I understand, but I think that there is something to this. I take some kind of solace from remembering how the French reacted when the extreme right came and tried to take over with Marine Le Pen, and there was a refusal, and even the French left managed to come together against it. And I take it also with what we've just seen in Canada with regards to the election of the prime minister there. I mean, there's just opportunities to say no, and it is the time to say no.
Yes, it is. It is a time to say no, but it is also a time to remember Yom HaShoah, the Day of Remembrance, celebrated last week, a few days ago, to remember the Holocaust. And the Holocaust went on for some years in Germany and Eastern Europe before it was dealt with. And it took a war and killing of millions of people before it was dealt with. So we have to do better this time. We cannot let autocracy take charge. So I agree with you totally, Ben. Anyway, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much to our guests, Ben Davis and Gene Rosenfeld and Manfred Henningsen, and our co-host, Tim Apicella. I'm Jay Fidell, host of Keeping the World Company. We've been discussing looking under the hood for what Trump is really doing. Thanks to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha.